Good evening, Dr. Mateo. This is my final presentation for our ELAD 619 using research for school improvement. The general theme of my inquiry and my presentation is supporting literacy development during COVID-19. So my main research question is how can we as teachers support students' literacy development using COVID-19 friendly strategies and resources? I have 3 sub-questions for this inquiry, and they are: how can teachers collaborate across grade levels to share resources and techniques? What role does parent support play in digital literacy development? And how can traditional literacy development strategies and resources be repurposed for students learning from home? So before I get started into the context, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background information. So when I discuss the Henry et al. Article, I will be using the letters RT, which stands for reciprocal teaching. When I discuss the Kwan article, I will be using the letters ESTE, which stands for Elementary School Technology Education. And when discussing the Wilkinson et al. Article, I will talk about dialogic teaching, which basically means that students are able to understand and form arguments through speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And it's very similar to inquiry dialogue. So the context of this inquiry, it's really a reflection of a big challenge, a problem that I think all teachers are experiencing right now with the COVID-19 virus hitting and having to go into quarantine and doing virtual learning. It is an area of education that has never really been done before. And we as teachers were kind of forced to make it work, to figure it out. And I know personally that since March, since we first went into lockdown, it was a struggle to make learning meaningful for students, especially virtually. In my case, I teach in an elementary school, so many of those activities are hands-on, collaborative, a lot of learning through play, and trying to accomplish the same thing via Zoom is extremely difficult. And when we went back into a hybrid model in September, we only had, let's say, for example, at the most 8 students were allowed in a classroom, and the rest of them were learning through Zoom virtually. So for those students who were learning in the classroom twice a week, we as teachers still needed to maintain social distance and follow CDC safety guidelines to ensure that all students were safe. And that also goes into the difficulty of making learning meaningful, because you cannot use manipulatives, you cannot use shared materials, which is something that we, especially as elementary school teachers, really depend on. And I believe that this is meaningful for my leadership practice, because something that I feel has been lacking in my school is our school leaders being knowledgeable about how to make learning more engaging. Usually in the beginning, during our staff meetings, teachers would bring up concerns like, oh, I have students, when I'm teaching the students in person, like I'll lose the kids on Zoom and vice versa. Like, how can I remedy this? And the answers were really just, oh, that's a good question, I'll look into that. Or, oh, maybe ask your coworkers and see if they have any suggestions. So I personally didn't feel like our school leaders stepped up in a sense of being a source for knowledge and support in this time, where there are so many unknowns and where a lot of teachers are incredibly stressed and just trying to do what's best for their students. So that's really why I wanted to look into this, because I think it is a problem that the majority of teachers in the United States are facing. And I believe that it will definitely help shape my leadership style in the future. So for my literature review, I had two big ideas from the articles that I read for this inquiry. The first one is the use of meaningful technologies and strategies. So what I found through the literature that I read is that when educators use specific technology programs or technology-driven strategies, they have the potential to support those students who are struggling with literacy development. And something that I found in my own teaching is that many teachers, when they have struggling learners or struggling readers, they are very fearful to challenge them because they feel that they will get overwhelmed or that they won't meet the expectation and it will be a deterrent for the student. But after reading the literature, I'll start with the Henry et al. Article. They talk a lot about when students are given ownership of their literacy development and are put in a leadership role, it allows them to excel, especially in a collaborative learning environment. The study that I read followed 3 students who really struggled in their literacy development, high school age students, and teachers were in the process of completing a professional development program for an RT model teaching. And it talked a lot about how students were able to feel empowered by their progress and therefore were excited to continue in their learning, and it really jump-started their literacy development. Towards the end of the study, some of the phrases that were used to describe those once struggling literacy students were a skilled, competent online reader. And one of them was placed by her classmates in a role of leadership over the more vocal and proficient students because of the skills and strategies she demonstrated while reading and communicating online. So for me as an educator to see that this specific teaching model combined with the use of technology allowed these students who were once struggling readers to be put in positions of power by their classmates is incredible. There is a similar thought in the Kwan article, which focuses on professional development for pre-service teachers, so teachers who haven't physically been in a classroom yet. After completing their professional development program, which lasted 3 weeks, and the focus was on ESTE. Not only did these pre-service teachers understand the importance of utilizing these technologies in the classroom, but they felt more prepared to go into the classroom and to teach these students successfully. My next big idea for my literature review is the importance of professional development programs. So something that I've seen throughout these articles that I have been reading are, sorry, my cat is meowing at me. Something that I have seen throughout the literature that I've reviewed for this inquiry is the idea of professional development programs as opposed to professional development days. Usually, at least in my experience, when we have professional development, It's either Danielson based, which is something that we do every year. We all know about it after working as an educator in New Jersey for at least a year. You understand what Danielson is. And they only last a few hours, maybe a whole day, depending on the development training. But a lot of these articles talked about, programs that were 3 weeks, programs that were 2 years, 3 years. So for me as a future leader, that is something that is very important because it really gives the teachers the opportunity to grow when they are given the chance to have a professional development program that lasts a longer period of time. So with that being said, meaningful professional developments are key in order for teachers to effectively utilize internet education programs and strategies. I think that this is extremely important, especially after COVID-19. I think that a lot of schools will definitely continue to have a virtual component in their educational plan. So teachers being able to utilize various internet programs and strategies that can be used online, I think is extremely important moving forward in education as a whole. In the Wilkinson et al. Article that I read, they were in the middle of a 3-year professional development program. This article was written during the second year. So something that they did was videotaped discussions between teachers at the beginning of that academic year and at the end, and did an analysis on their idea of these practices that they're learning in this professional development program. And the quote says, analysis of the video discussions showed that teachers made substantial shifts in their discourse practices towards a more dialogic pedagogy. So these teachers, after being in this program for 2 years, started to shift their practices to reflect a more effective strategy, which in this case is dialogic educational practice. So again, like I said, this shows that when teachers are provided meaningful professional development, they're able to shift that thought process, that pedagogy, to benefit literacy development. This is also seen in the Kwan article, where they were, again, conducting a study of pre-service teachers, and this ESTE training lasted 3 weeks. So part of that study was a focus on how the pre-service teachers felt towards using this technology in their classrooms. And the quote that I chose says, the study results indicated a statistically significant improvement in the participants' attitudes toward ESTE, particularly the need for ESTE, the ability to implement ESTE, and the value of ESTE. And I think that as future leaders in education, that's extremely important. Not only do teachers need to be given the opportunity to have these professional development programs and opportunities, but by the end of it, they should understand the need and the value of it. It shouldn't just be, okay, well, we're going to do this just because our admin is telling us to. I believe that teachers should legitimately feel like this is going to help my pedagogy, this is going to help my students. Okay, so we're moving into the methods of my inquiry. So the participants are myself as the action researcher and 14 general education students in my, 14 general education teachers in my K-3 school. I used 3 forms of data for this inquiry, the first being teacher interviews with a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher in my school. Student work, one from a student who had active parents in education and one who did not, and also a teacher survey among those 14 general education teachers. So the pictures that I included in my methods is an example of the top being a piece of work given by a student who has very engaged parents, whose parents are very engaged in the child's education. And the second is an example of a child's work who does not have very engaged parents, who, according to the teacher, is pretty much left on their own, left to their own devices. The assignment that they had to do was use the 6 vocabulary words and sentences. And you can clearly see that there is a discrepancy, a clear discrepancy between the child with active parents and inactive parents, but we will get into that a little bit later. Okay, so my first finding from my inquiry is that parental involvement is vital in supporting literacy development. From the survey I conducted in November, 100% of the teachers agreed that not only does parental involvement have a direct impact on a student's literacy development, but that there is a clear discrepancy between those students who have active parents who are making sure that they're doing their assignments, who are helping them, who are there for them physically, and those students who have inactive parents, whether that be from a single parent household, living with parents who don't speak the language, living with parents who have multiple jobs, whatever the reasoning may be, there is a direct discrepancy between those two groups of students. So in order to analyze this further, I reviewed several pieces of student work from second grade classroom and a first grade classroom. One of those students with active parents, one with inactive. And as you can see from the example I used in the previous slide, there was a very clear difference between those two students. The student who was supported by their parents displayed excellent writing skills and showed that they understand the meaning of the words. The unsupported student, however, was not even able to use one of those vocabulary words in a sentence. Furthermore, in an interview I conducted with a first grade teacher, when I asked her about how important parental involvement is and if she believes that there is a direct correlation between parental involvement and literacy development, she said, yes, definitely. I see a difference when the parents are supportive, the kids are more engaged, they want to learn, they're there to say, we have to read, we have to do this assignment, versus the parent that, due to their busy schedule, it does become very challenging and it does affect their literacy development. So from these forms of data, I was able to conclude that in order for students to succeed in their literacy development, it is incredibly important that parents are supportive and that parents are active and engaged in their child's education. My next finding for this inquiry is the focus on collaboration between teachers and or grade levels. So according to the survey that I conducted within my school, 51.7% of the teachers believe that the amount of collaboration between the teachers and the grade levels has decreased since the start of hybrid learning. In normal circumstances, teachers are allotted time in their schedules to meet with their colleagues, to have cross grade level meetings. But since we went into quarantine and since COVID-19 restrictions and CDC guidelines, it has been very difficult for those teachers to find the time in their schedules and within their new responsibilities in this virtual learning world to create opportunities for those meetings, which is very unfortunate. I believe that collaboration is extremely important within a school. It not only allows teachers to have access to various resources and strategies, but it gives teachers the time to lean on each other, especially in times like this where there is so much demand on teachers and they have so many more responsibilities now than they did previously. In my survey, 50% of teachers say that they use materials and strategies collected during these meetings sometimes, and 35.7% say that they use them often. So that just goes to show how important these meetings are to the majority of the teachers in my school, at least, and I'm sure in schools all across the country. This idea is also seen during my interview with a first grade teacher. She said that collaboration is extremely important, and that normally first grade and kindergarten have at least one collaboration meeting per week where they discuss strategies to use with struggling first grade students. The kindergarten teachers are able to give them insight into those students and what strategies worked, what materials worked. But due to COVID-19 restrictions, that has gone down significantly. So as you can see from the data that I collected, it is clear that there needs to be a focus on collaborative meetings between not only coworkers, but between the grade levels as well. Okay, my third finding is that there should be more allotted time for pre-teaching technology to students. So I can speak personally in my school. Since we went into quarantine and started some form of virtual learning, our district has bought several different platforms for students. I can't even name them all, even if I wanted to. There are probably about 12 different platforms that they bought for teachers to use. And with that in mind, the teachers having the time to pre-teach this technology and how to use it effectively is extremely important so that students can get the most out of it. In the survey that I conducted amongst my school, 92.9% of teachers believe that there needs to be more pre-teaching for students to be able to use technology effectively. This sentiment can also be seen in my interview with the first grade teacher, who said that when students first came into the hybrid learning environment, she used a whole period just to teach them how to use a computer. She used a 45-minute period to teach them how to log into their accounts, how to type in emails, how to use the keyboard. And something that I've talked to her about in the past, separate from this interview and in the interview as well, is that it was a struggle in the beginning. It was very hard. A lot of, first grade students, they're not used to typing. They don't have the motor skills. They don't have the dexterity. It's a little bit difficult for them. But now in December, they are able to do everything on their own. They're able to log in. They know where to go. They know where their platforms are that they need to be and what they need to use. So it has allowed this teacher to effectively cut out all of that pre-teaching that would have been, or not the pre-teaching, but the review of the use of technology that she would have had to do at this time because she spent so much time doing it in the beginning of the year. So now when the students are given an assignment, they can just go right in and this teacher can focus on the teaching and focus on the kids as opposed to the use of technology. I have seen many teachers, walking around, logging their students into their computers and logging them into their programs. And I believe that in the moment it seems easier, but in the long run, it's going to hurt them because for example, in times like this, where there is no hybrid learning, all students are back learning 100% remotely. So now if they don't have a parent or an older sibling to sit there and help them log in, how are they going to use the technology effectively? It's just not going to work. I believe that it's a deterrent to the student and their progress. So with that being said, I do believe that more time needs to be allowed for pre-teaching of technology to students so that they can use the technology to their benefit. So some recommendations that I have based on this inquiry that I completed. I believe that there needs to be a focus on professional development on new technologies and platforms being used during COVID-19, as well as implementing programs with long-term goals. I believe that in this day and age, this is the best way to assure that teachers are getting the most out of professional developments when there are long-term goals associated with them. So that means completing professional development programs that are not only a day or two, but that are at least a few weeks or even a year or two, depending on what the goal is for the school. Additionally, I think that it is incredibly important to create more opportunities and incentives for parent engagement during virtual learning. It seems to me that, students who had supportive parents last year still have those supportive parents now during during quarantine and during virtual learning. It's the students whose parents have always been inactive or have always been unsupportive in education that are really causing a lot of concern right now, because at the very least, when the students were in school, they were in school with their teachers, and we could step in and be not a replacement for their parents, but we were in a role to be more engaged with them and more of a hands-on role. And now they really only see us through a computer screen. And especially at this age, so much of what we do depends on the parents following up and completing the assignments with them and practicing with them. So when that's not happening, it's extremely difficult for students to improve in their literacy development. So I definitely think that creating more incentives for parental engagement is incredibly important during virtual learning, especially. Another recommendation I have is to allot more time in teacher schedules for meaningful pre-teaching of technologies. So just like in elementary schools, usually the first week or two of school is spent going over the rules and routines and practicing. So I believe that in this virtual learning environment that we find ourselves in, that time should be that similar idea should be allotted to pre-teaching of technology, giving kids a week or two to really make sure that they understand how to access the platforms, how to use them effectively, how to log in, everything that they need to know so that once they get their assignment, they can just go in and do it. So some reflections that I have for my work. It's definitely, this action research has definitely motivated me to look into the issue of parental involvement. I have, this is not new with virtual education. This is not something that just appeared once the pandemic hit. This is always something, at least in my school, that's been an issue, that some parents just do not give their children's education the time that it needs at home. I am very understanding that some people are, a single parent and have multiple jobs, or, have several children and have a hard time focusing on one child at one time. But at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want the students to succeed and to grow in their education and to be successful in their literacy development, especially at this age where it is so vital that they get those literacy building blocks to build upon throughout their life. So yes, I definitely am going to look into more strategies for parental engagement. And as terms of what this means for my leadership in the future, when I am working in a leadership position in a school, I definitely want to find professional development programs that have long-term goals, because I think that for professional developments, if there is no long-term goal, there really is no point to doing it. If you're going to give the time for professional development and give these teachers the opportunity to grow, then you should really go for it and give them every opportunity, every chance to reform their practice. Because at the end of the day, I believe that that is the point of professional development programs. It's so that teachers can not so much change their practice and their pedagogy, but improve upon it and build upon it. And that doesn't happen in a day or two, that it can't. It needs to be a constant for a substantial period of time in order to see any real results. So as a leader, I will definitely make sure that I am implementing professional development programs that have long-term goals as opposed to 1 day, 2 day workshops that, teachers may forget about after a day or two. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. I enjoyed your class very much. Thank you for allowing us to do this presentation as opposed to a paper. It was more meaningful than you'll ever know. Have a great winter break. Bye.